Welcome to our innovation community and today's workout and our session on design thinking 101. We are trying to really grapple with what is design thinking, how do you use to generate innovative ideas, and basically figure out and answer all your questions in terms of what is design thinking, how do you really implement it in organizations and other pieces. Welcome to the session. My name is David Isaac, and I have keen interest in the process of innovation, generating innovations, and worked with organizations, consulted organizations for the past 20 years or so, and worked with them on different areas like design thinking, inventive thinking techniques, systems thinking, and others. So let's begin our journey. I'll share my screen and the module that we will follow, the mode we will follow today is I will take you through some slides on design thinking, orient you towards what design thinking is, look at some examples. And as we go ahead, please do use our community to, plug in your questions. And as this happens, I would really answer your questions and we'll take each question at a time. So let's begin our journey and we get started with this. So I'll just share my screen. So you're looking at design thinking 101. Essentially, how do you use design thinking? What is design thinking? And how do you use the power of design thinking for us to generate innovative ideas and business value? This is the whole objective. Please do be active on the innovation community. We have a lot of stuff there. We are looking at design thinking as an initial starting block, and we go ahead and look at different other methods and techniques of innovation and creativity as we move ahead. And we have a series of other workouts and sessions lined up for you from Thinkly. My name is David, and I am a certified design thinker from MIT Sloan, Design Sprint Academy, also Luma Institute. And typically, design thinking is also termed as a human-centered design because essentially it emerges from what we know as human-centeredness and kind of an empathy element. And how do you build empathy and other pieces in? So let's begin the journey and we will explore now on what is design thinking and how does it be different from different other techniques that we have towards innovation and how can we take our thinking to the new level and create systems which are sustainable, which are future oriented and not only solve challenges for today in a win-win manner, but also provide a lot of value to various stakeholders. So a study done some time back on the return on investments on capital, and the study involved a lot of organizations to really figure out what is their level and what is really special about these companies. If you see on the right, which is circled here, you see that there are organizations which have a higher performance on return on investment on capital and we try to figure out on what essentially is different. And when they studied and deep dive and analyzed, like in every data set, you have some median and a peak and certain kind of elements. You see this kind of a long tail, and that's very interesting because most of the insights really come from there. When you look at an outlier or extreme positions, and what they really observed there is that you could really see that the answer was pretty simple. It was what was known as customer focus, right? And we all know customer focus is important, but as we journey along somewhere down the line, it really shifts. I would also say that it's not only customer focus; it's one level higher in a way. It's also called as customer obsession wherein the organization, it could be a startup, it could be your own department, it could be a particular area, your own team that you're working with. You need to have this kind of a customer obsession in terms of driving value continuously to your customers and to your stakeholders. The beauty is how do you really continue this focus and how do you ensure that this focus does not shift at various times. And this is also reinforced uh, by Steve Jobs and a lot of other industry, stalwarts, where Steve Jobs really mentioned is you have to start with the customer experience, to begin with the customer experience and work back towards technology. So technology itself does not provide any innovation or value. When you say innovation, innovation has to be practical. It just can't be some newness or something different in a way. That different has to add value to the stakeholder. And what he is mentioning here, if you look at, is we begin with the customer experience and the customer, and then use the right kind of technology, just right. The key word is just right technology for us to enable this to happen, neither more, neither less. So the whole focus is technology as an enabler rather than a source of innovation. Many times we forget that we just innovate processes and systems and then we say we have become innovators. It isn't so. The technology has to enable a certain kind of a value driving entity. And design thinking really helps us to do that. Similarly, if you this chart really shows you the exponential growth of technology and the evolving system that we are surrounded with. There is so much of change, political upheaval, technological shifts, new technologies emerging, customer needs dramatically shifting, interconnectedness, computing power is increasing dramatically. And with these kind of scenarios, which are so very dramatic shifts, which we have never seen before, even humanity to a large extent hasn't seen this kind of very dramatic shifts. It's very important that we continue with our focus onto the stakeholder. And therefore, we require something like design thinking. So, what is design thinking, you may ask? And so, when we say what is design thinking, Tim Brown, one of the practitioners and stalwarts on design thinking, earlier worked with IDEO and others. Defines design thinking as a human centered approach. Like I said earlier, it's a human centered approach. The whole focus is the stakeholder, the emotions, the empathy, but it also integrates needs of people with possibilities of technology because it has to become feasible in some way and also merge along with the business success because it has to have business value. So only when you can integrate the needs of stakeholders along with technological possibilities and feasibility and with business success is where true innovation comes. And the method to do that essentially is what we know as design thinking. Of course, design thinking has different uh, definitions and so many authors have tried to grapple with it, but this seems to be a very good starting point for us in some way. The next slide really articulates, this kind of a thought. How do you graphically really understand this statement? So, what design thinking does is it enables you to really focus on successful solutions and innovation. That itself is at the center of three circles. The part that we spoke of is human centeredness, the need, the human need, whether it is technologically possible and feasible, and whether it is viable and profitable for the business. Only when we are able to create solutions and designs for our current challenges, and as we design for the future, as long as we focus on this area, is where you have highest probability of innovation. And design thinking enables you to do this in a very, very structured manner, right? So this is the key element of what we know as design thinking. I'll just maybe just pause. Any questions you can just type something on the chat window. Any questions that you are having that you would want to answer, please do type, and we can take some of your questions as we go along. So as we looked at design thinking here is a very exciting space. And what design thinking does is rather than starting from technology, many people get obsessed with a particular business idea, especially with startups. I was working with a startup a group and a group that supports startup. So what they mentioned is many times we are so obsessed with our own idea and with the business logic that we really forget the human side of it, the need side of it, and then we worry with the product solution match in some form, and that's the key struggle that many people have, right? And similarly, people come from a technology space and the excellent technology, excellent designs, excellent solutions and other pieces. But when they try and make business sense out of it, it is not viable or there is no need at all. There have been so many solutions which innovators have come up with, which were way ahead of their time. For that matter, for example, if you look at the touch screens, okay, the Apple wasn't the one who created touch screens. There were so many others players earlier who had the touch screen technology and with the stylus which came in, which later on Samsung also promoted very aggressively. But this wasn't really their invention in some form. This innovation existed a half a decade earlier, or more than that earlier. But what really happened is how do you use technology for you to create a business value to, say, for example, a mobile user, and similarly a laptop user who is using the screen, and these are the kinds of areas where design thinking becomes very useful in some form. So design thinking essentially, if you look at, is a step-by-step process to empathize with your stakeholders and create solutions, designs which are very innovative. So that's one of the, it's a process. So everything is a process. And it's not that it's something which is fuzzy. You have a step-by-step approach, and that's what design thinkers started to really figure out is if I can decode somehow the thinking and the approach that, say, for example, designers like architects and people who are very creative and who do a lot of creative stuff, if I can decode that method somehow, and if I can tweak it to solving business challenges, then I can solve fuzzy challenges because things are getting complex. They aren't algorithmic in approach. So how do you use some kind of fuzziness kind of an approach to create solutions which we never thought of? And that was the exact problem that people were trying to figure out. And over the last design thinking emerged somewhere in 1960s, 1970s. So practitioners in Stanford, IDEO, and some of the other universities and organizations across have been really grappling with how do you do this? Because if I have a process, then I can make everybody as innovators and they can come up with their own beautiful solutions which are sustainable and future ready. And one of the models and the processes that got refined and documented by UKDC is what is known as a double diamond approach. So they have a four-step approach. If you look at discover, define, develop, and deliver. So this is like a double diamond. You see these kind of divergent, convergent loops here. So you start with the business challenge on one side, and then you discover the challenge from the human-centered perspective. You convert the business challenge into a human-centered perspective. We will shortly see on with an example on how you could actually, shift your focus and perspective using empathy. And you come to the discover, and then you define the problem not from a business front, but from a people front, from an empathy front, and then develop solutions and deliver and create prototypes and solution designs, which enable you to come to the business world and the practical world itself. So this kind of a four-step process becomes a very useful process where many organizations have used this kind of a process to develop a lot of business solutions which are very practical and yet innovative. Right? So this is one of the models. Of course, there are other models from Stanford and other institutes which articulate uh, the steps. So you can see a six-step or a seven-step or a nine-step kind of an approach on design thinking. These are various forms of trying to decode the way you would actually use some of these methods. Of course, design thinking per se is consists of a lot of techniques. And we will see two, three techniques today at a foundational level. Uh, but there are more than 200 odd techniques which you can use in design thinking. Depending on the challenge you are solving, it would be apt. A lot of business impact organizations have seen across in industries. You would see Accenture very heavily deploying design thinking as they engage with their clients, create solutions. SAP, Deloitte, there are a lot of associations with design firms. So if you see, there would be pure consulting firms and IT firms and financial firms, but then you would have design thinking experts and organizations which they have taken over, where they use their expertise and deliver a coherent design to the stakeholders. So rather than giving a pointed solution, they try and discover what is the space, and really how do you leverage your capabilities to get more business value. Braun has used this for their, so it could be product design. So, when you look at design thinking, it's product design, it's business design. You can use design thinking for futures, for predicting your futures of the business, creating strategies, strategic design, even for that matter, design your life. So design thinking is also morphosed into a lot of these areas. Procter and Gamble for their product design has been using a lot of design thinking techniques. UiPath is using design thinking. Braun. Some of the Indian Infosys has been very heavily invested into design thinking techniques. A lot of pharma firms, Indian pharma firms also are experimenting because they realize that they have to now really lay focus on the patient, on the doctor, and how do you really articulate, and how do you change this focus shift from more of a treatment to wellness. But you will see a lot of IT firms who use design thinking for their product development systems, solution design, process developments, new product introductions, and others. Of course, there are some areas where you don't really need design thinking, especially when it's like a very pure sciences. It's a construction of a bridge. You don't require a design thinking. You may like a designer, but they use principles which are standard. So, of course, there you would, in some ways, it becomes constrained. So here is an example, L'Oreal here. Instead of you giving a standard kind of entity or solution, you can have customized solutions which are coming, and that really helps you to create what is customized solutions. Bank of America, in terms of Keep the Change program, very interesting video that they have on YouTube on the solution design and how they would engage with children to come up with solutions that enable saving and also enable a lot of other benefits for the customer and for the bank. So it's a win-win solution. So the whole idea is to get a win-win solution to the on the table. ABN AMRO, a lot of design thinking techniques. SAP, Apple to a large extent also has been using design thinking. Yes. So I'll just pause maybe here and take some of your questions. I'll just stop sharing, take your questions. So let me see if there are some questions on our innovation board here. So Aniket Rao essentially is saying here, how did you first discover the impact of design thinking on business, and what made you passionate about incorporating it into your approach? Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So typically, I come in from a very algorithmic, and I'm a Six Sigma lean expert. So you may imagine that in Six Sigma you have a very defined DMAC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control kind of a journey, and it's very fixed, very rigid in a way. What really excited me, and also I'm a lean expert, so you have different techniques on lean, and I also do a lot of data analytics, which is all fact-based kind of entity. And if you look at design thinking, is more of a fuzzy entity where empathy comes in. There is a human-centeredness. There is a more of a discovery.
there is what we call in design thinking a very important aspect of do and learn. You don't know an answer. So unless you experiment with and you try it out, you really don't know. What really excited me was I found that there was one aspect that was missing in many of the techniques, though they were there, but they were not so very elaborate and they did not give very clear-cut methods on how do you understand people emotional pains and how do you understand their agony, because the solution that you provide has to address that to a large extent. And I found that there were no easy answers in some of the other sciences, but design thinking very elaborately, did that. And what it also did was that not only it shifted a perspective. So rather than you saying that, I want to have, say, for example, I would be solving, say, in an organization, I want to reduce cost of operations. Okay. And if I do that from a very analytical frame of mind, I would do a Pareto and an analysis of what are the top what are the categories of cost, start looking at them and then analyzing them and figure out and address that. If you look at it, I may draw actions in order to reduce the cost. But do my actions get accepted by people? Now that's where the problem comes in, is because I may have a beautiful solution which people don't accept. And therefore, coming from a people angle is what is really bothering people and why is the cost of operations higher? Does it mean that there is rework and there is pain for people because they are doing stuff which is not automated and human dependent? And therefore, how do you elevate and remove this pain for people who are struggling? And as you do that, automatically the cost comes down. So you would see that you are able to address people angle, you are able to see the business angle, and it suddenly shifts your perspective. So that really is what really attracted me to design thinking, right? So I hope Aniket do ping in, if there are further clarifications, any other follow up question also. Kabir is asking on. I've heard a lot about design thinking. How different is it from the traditional ideation process? Right. What really happens in traditional ideation process is we go with the assumption that I fairly know the problem, right? And we typically get into some brainstorming and other entities. Say, for example, in the ideation process, you do brainstorming, you may do some kind of mind mapping techniques and others. So typically, I work with an organization wherein you may say that, okay, I'm trying to really look at doing a improvement of sales and increasing sales for my particular business line. And I have a certain product and a certain market, and how do I increase the sales in that particular segment? So you would have a brainstorming with experts, seemingly experts who come in and sit together and discuss and figure out and look at data and analyze, and that expertise is necessary. And you come up with your ideas and you pick up some of the topmost ideas and start deploying them in a way. What design thinking does is it takes a step back. Okay, if you see, there are 4 steps. So you take the business problem and you do discovering of the challenge. Okay. You are discovering the challenge area from a human perspective first, because you want to really question your assumptions that you may assume that my sales is not happening because my pricing is not right, or I'm not giving discounts given by my customers. And that, so if you may do that and you may replicate it as an action saying that I want to reduce the cost, I will reduce the prices and give some discounts. But what really happens there is you lose your profit margin in a way. Now, what design thinking does is it starts taking the discover route, saying that is there, if I'm going to increase sales, so for my customer segment that I have, what, and the stakeholder and the customer segment that I'm attacking, what are the challenges that they face with my current product? Is that meeting their future and current needs? What else is going to solve their issue and what are the problems they are facing? And therefore, what do I do? And that discovery process becomes very central to the design thinking approach. You start looking at empathy and understanding, and that's where you get insights. You may realize that your current product itself, to some extent, may have become irrelevant to their needs. And therefore, you need to tweak it or address it and shift it to a certain area with certain kind of modifications for the current need of your customers. And as soon as you do that, it addresses a certain pain area. And for the customer, not for me, but for the customer, for my customer. And that's the shift that you're looking at. And as that happens, automatically sales jump up. And in fact, you can command a higher price also, a premium for this kind of scenario. So design thinking not only helps you to take a very defensive stance, but become very aggressive also. Great. Any other questions? We have uh, Jignesh Mistry. Yeah, Jignesh. Uh, along this journey, can you recall a situation where the application of design thinking not only transformed the process but positively influenced the team dynamics and collaboration? Yeah, so there are many. Let me just think through. So, any application of design thinking that transformed the process but influenced the team collaboration. Yeah. So, what really happened? Yeah. So, I think I was working with one of the top five mobility companies and the R&D folks. So, they were doing interior designs for vehicles and you can imagine they were like cross-functional teams. So you would have experts coming in from not only electronics, electrical, and but they were trying to collaborate with each other in a kind of a workout scenario for some time to really figure out how do you create some features, or say for example a dashboard which is very human centered and it has a human machine interface in a way, and is very elegant. And how do I look at a vehicle dashboard and the interiors? How do you transform this off? And we did something like design thinking kind of a workout, blended, of course, along with some other techniques like inventive thinking techniques. So it's not only design thinking, but then it needs to be blended with some other methods. In this case, it was blended with inventive thinking techniques. And as we did that, they realized that there were so many solutions that they could really get. And since they were all experts in the specific area, they knew exactly the dimensions and the limitations and other pieces. So there was no discovery as such. You could actually go there and they get very concrete kind of wireframe designs on solutions which they presented. And that I think helped them to collaborate, multifunctional collaboration and file patents. So that was a very fulfilling kind of an experience which I had working with this team. Okay, there are some beautiful questions coming up. Anisha Patel, how can smaller and more traditional businesses effectively adopt and implement design thinking principles without feeling overwhelmed? Are there any entry points and steps that you would recommend? Yes, sure. I think design thinking can be used by what you've mentioned here as traditional businesses, smaller traditional businesses, in fact, at any scale. Okay. It can be startups, you could have traditional business lines which are trying to redesign. And I'll show you some tools techniques as we go along. I'll just maybe move on to the slides just now after your question. I'll show you some techniques called as journey mapping, also, stakeholder pain gains identification technique. These are very simple techniques which can be used by any organization, irrespective of the size, to really discover and empathize with the stakeholders. So, with that, I'll just share my screen. I'll take you back to some of the techniques on design thinking, and that should enable you to really get a hang on, what does it really do? I mean, how do you change a business challenge into a human-centered challenge? And how do you do that? That's the very interesting part, because that's where the insights come in. So, I'll just share my screen now. And what you will see here is we will look at some techniques that I have shortlisted for you at basic level. So how do you discover your stakeholders?
How do you create an experience diagram? So we look at maybe two techniques now at the moment. So when you have to discover, when you are discovering your stakeholders, we need to identify the whole focus is what are the pains and gains that they have, and how do you really understand that? So that usually gets done using an empathy map, gets done using the roast on butt technique in large number of ways. It would get done. And what you would also see here is, so we'll take an example. So this is an example of a commercial electric truck manufacturer who's trying to come into India and set a base here, and they want to transform the customer experience. So name change, of course, name change here. So they have a strong product. They are looking at EV vehicles, large trucks, wherein a lot of material, if you observe, is moving in these large trucks on our main highways, and that's going to increase. So how do you look at sustainability? How do you look at business line? How do you meet the traditional requirements of our customers? So this is like a fleet owner and a service provider, so and they want to really expand. So and there's a lot of opportunity because a lot of organizations have the targets on carbon footprint. ESG targets are there. Government of India is encouraging people to move to sustainable fuels, energy consumption, and others. And if this organization can break the market and provide services which are better than our traditional entity with EV vehicles, with the entity and add value, then you have really hit the bullseye. And so when you look at it, what it does is, so stakeholder mapping and empathy map really helps you to identify the stakeholders. So if you look at who are the stakeholders for this company, for Google, so who are the stakeholders? And the stakeholders here you will observe is truck fleet owners who are basically who are there. So basically, they are providing the trucks, and they could be bulk trucks, 50 trucks, 25 trucks to the fleet owners. So the fleet truck owners, they are important because they are the decision makers. That organization is decision maker. I have to transition from a regular petrol and diesel trucks or vehicles into an EV vehicle. So I have a CFO from that organization. Truck drivers themselves are customers and stakeholders. You have operations and scheduling lead who is also a stakeholder, because how do you keep on ensuring that your operational levels are kept high? And if you look at these stakeholders, what are the typical pains and gains that they have currently, and their apprehensions that they have when I am trying to enter into an EV segment and provide these kind of vehicles? As you start thinking from that direction, you then realize that one of the concerns that they may have in terms of pains is we are not sure whether the technology is going to be useful for me. Is this reliable? Is this for a long time? What will be the maintenance and charging cost, and who will create this ecosystem? There are high risks which are involved from investment terms. How do you really manage that? And there are also ways that they see that a lot of organizations are going to migrate to these EV vehicles, and therefore, how do I really address them? And how do I meet the compliance needs? How do I meet the huge market? There's a huge market which is there, so those are the gains. You could meet compliance needs. Those are, you could meet the compliance needs of organizations. Those are positives. So for the EV vehicle manufacturer, unless you now design, it's not only the vehicle. So you realize immediately that it is not only the vehicle design and the capability and the power and the efficiency of the vehicle and the design of the vehicle. It is also how you are going to provide the solution that addresses the pains and gains for the stakeholder. Unless you create ecosystems of charging, of maintenance, of investment shifts, and then position yourself as a value add onto a much wider canvas, you will never be able to address this market or breaking into this market. So this kind of techniques helps you to understand the stakeholder need, empathy map, and others. Similarly, one more technique I'll show you just as we speak about the techniques, and in design thinking, it's very interesting, is what is called as a customer experience diagram. Can be used by another, small industries, small, setups.
You have customers, you have sometimes it's a direct customer, sometimes it is the stakeholder, but they experience like software development. I have a program manager, and then I have a tech lead who is a stakeholder. And the experience that they have is not only the product and the software development, it's the experience that they have because they are decision makers. How do you enhance that? How do you really address that? Because very critical. And the experience that they have. So one technique that is done is experience diagramming. It essentially helps you to diagnose each step, each milestone in the way the customer experiences the product and the service you are providing, step by step as you go ahead. And that helps you to decode and visualize it into a graphical form and immediately draw insights. A very useful technique. Another refined and a much complicated method after this is what they call as a service blueprint, which starts looking at not only the human experience, but the experience along with technology, an interface of human along with technology. You have your screens, you have your tabs, you have your outlets in the stores, you have got, various devices that you interface with. How does a human being work with that and experience that all? So if you say this is a very simple kind of a chart, if you see this chart here, there are on the x-axis various stages, which is the time series, and then you have experiences, very happy, you have neutral, and you have very unhappy. You can have a 5-pointer scale also there coming. And what you are doing is you are trying to map the experience of the customer or the stakeholder as they move through the entire journey, right? So, for example, here is an example: Swiggy and Zomato, when they are working through, you will see, when you buy or you place an order through these apps, as a customer, what is your experience? So you want to, and say Zomato and Swiggy wants to enhance their customer experience. And how do you really work with that? It could be similarly Swiggy and Zomato. We have so many, people who provide food and lunch and diet food and others from home also. There are these small kitchens from where they provide this kind of service. It can be used. The same tool can be used by them also. So if you look at the map, so here's a diagram here for a customer experience diagram where you see the various steps. You see here, these are various stages which are steps which are there, and across them you will see the experience. So if you're hungry here, pretty neutral. You discover the restaurant, it's still neutral, sometimes difficult, sometimes complicated. But the whole issue comes in when you see some of the charges which are hidden, and suddenly you realize that it's there, it's right at the very end. So it's difficult for you to come back. And then that experience drops. Then it rises to a certain level as you order and you receive. But then what it really indicates to you is there an opportunity for us to improve experience for the stakeholder? Say yes. So if I can build systems by which charges become transparent and yet I don't lose revenue, huh, which is the key. So I don't want to lose revenue also. So how do I build that kind of a system? How do we now shift experiences while discovering the restaurant or opening the app or making payments? How can I make that experience from a medium range to a higher range? If I can do that, then it becomes a very useful kind of a method. So these kind of techniques, the two techniques I showed you just now is human empathy, stakeholder pain gains identification, sometimes using an empathy map, a journey map, and that helps you to uncover a lot of insights. These are some very initial tools, but quite a few that get used very aggressively, very extensively by large number of organizations, large number of organizations. Right. So let me take some questions, more questions coming up. Austin Lobo, what advice do you have for budding consultants or professionals entering the field of business transformation? Is there a personal mantra or lesson learned that you would like to pass on? Okay, so for budding consultants and professionals, one mantra is continuous learning.
you have to be updated with what is really happening around you. So it's very necessary, and that's a mantra that I have also followed over the years. Is at least 7 to 10% of your take-home salary has to be invested in self-learning, in your professional growth, in areas that you like, so that you are able to accomplish. You need to. So one is continuous learning and also reading of a lot of areas which you aren't familiar with. So you may come with an engineering background, and then you should go towards literature. If you're from literature side, you should go towards some analytical and data analytics kind of tools and other techniques. So which helps you to be richer. Because as a consultant, our job is to find solutions which are easy and deployable for the client. Is not the design. It is not saying that I will do design thinking or data analytics or I will do some kind of IT transformation for you. No, that's the mode of in which you are providing services. For you to design good systems which are applicable and which give business value to your clients, it's necessary that you should be able to amalgamate and create the right kind of choose the right tools and methods so that it becomes easier for you, right? Okay, Lavanya is asking, having worked with diverse range of organizations, are there common misconceptions about design thinking that you encounter, and how do you address these misconceptions? Yes, I think very interesting one. So sometimes, and this is you get a notion, especially if you attend a design thinking or any kind of a element that it's like a silver bullet. So design thinking isn't a silver bullet. That's a misconception people have. And design thinking needs to be amalgamated with data analytics, with your methods of creativity, of discovery that you normally follow for you to have a lot of great benefit. The other misconception people have is that if I do UX, UI, user experience, user interface design, then that's design thinking. I think my perspective is UX UI is just one part of design thinking. Design thinking is a very vast entity which looks at the business value. Okay, and like we mentioned, it starts with the business problem and ends with the business solution. But UX UI typically, of course, is business oriented, it's experience oriented, but it looks at the granularity of how a human being interfaces or experiences that they have at various micro steps during the journey. So if I take the journey map and then dissect it further and zoom in, I will get many steps, and that's where UX UI starts becoming very important in a way. So I think these two misconceptions are there. Other misconception is, can I use design thinking for strategy? Of course you can. No, there's nothing wrong in it. As long as you are willing to experiment. And the method that is there is, it's not a structured method, it's do and learn. So you should be willing to fail and fail fast in a way. That's also a mantra of design. Right. Jenny, how can business measure the success and impact of design thinking initiatives? See, it's very easy, Jenny, here. As long as you begin with a business problem which is measurable, you will always have an impact which is measurable and you will see the outcome also. So, for example, if I say, how do I enhance sales? And then start taking action on that, and then you get a measurable impact in terms of plus minus. If you say, I want to enter into a new segment, how do I do that? If I do design thinking for new product development, and I can measure the success rate of or adoption rate of this new product or service vis-a-vis my past, introductions that I have done in the past using other techniques. As I say, it's not that you are removing the other techniques aside. So NPD development and is a technique, but you augment it with design thinking methods, and you will see a delta. So you'll see a delta in faster, introduction of products, more successful, more adoption rate. These are all measurable entities that you can easily measure and work with. Yeah. I think we'll take one more question. Gayatri Nair, are there any specific industries or sectors where design thinking is particularly well suited to drive innovation? Yes. design thinking essentially can be used for any industry, not that it's industry specific, but where the large number of applications exist in product development. So for appliance design, daily use elements that we put in. So for those product designs, you will see a lot of design thinking methods being applied for service industry, airlines industry, any service industry. If you look at, you will find design thinking very apt, because then you will be able to. That's where you are able to see the experience and have the customer right in front of you. So wherever you have customer right in front of you, or you can check and there's a product and then you can put in, you will see a lot of design thinking tools being developed. But design thinking in today's entity is also used by a lot of IT companies, software development companies, when they want to create solution designs for their clients. And they not only say that, okay, this is my requirement and therefore I'll do a development in a certain way. They say, let me discover something for you. And that's where really things come up with. Right? Great. Any other questions? Great, good. So thank you so much for joining in onto our Design Thinking 101 program. There will be others on design thinking, which we explore different application cases on design thinking. Do stay tuned in onto the innovation platform, and looking forward. Please do ask, interact on the innovation platform. We, depending on your need and others, we will craft some workouts for you. Thanks so much for joining.